Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It's part 2 of our December Q&A series. Obviously, lots has been happening on the channel, so we've had lots of great questions to get to, and, well, there's more of them to get to, so I guess we should just get straight into it.
There is always more, so
Yep.
as Tim says, we will get into it. Today's Q&A is sponsored by Corsair and their new Dominator Platinum RGB DDR4 memory available in white. That's right, the Dominator Platinum memory is now available in white, but if that's not unique enough for you, allowing you to further customize the memory are a dozen ultra bright, individually addressable X RGB LEDs mounted in the top of the modules. Corsair also has a wide range of kits available, including 16, 32, 64, and even 128GB capacities, with speeds ranging from 3200 to 4800 MHz. So for more information, please check the link in the video description.
Right, Steve, this next question is a big one for you.
Big one for me, all right.
How much sleep do you guys get when a new graphics card is released? And what was your favorite graphics card launch?
Well, it depends, but yeah, there's been a lot of sleepless nights. I'm actually really struggling at the moment. I've never, to go slightly off topic, I've never been at risk of burning out. Like, people always say, oh, you know, Steve, get some sleep, take it easy. And I've always found it pretty easy. Like, I enjoy the big benchmark sessions. I enjoy doing this stuff. I enjoy pouring every waking hour into the channel. And for the last, like, the 2 years leading up to bringing Tim on board were pretty brutal. Like, I had to really grow the channel to be able to justify bringing Tim on when he came out of university. That was really hard work. I went super hard at it there, but I never really felt burnt out at any point. And even you've been on the channel now for 3 years, haven't you?
Yep.
And we've had some pretty crazy times during those 3 years, and I've just not felt burnt out. But I have to admit, over the last 2 weeks, I'm not exactly sure what burnt out is, but I feel like I'm pretty well there. Like, I've really been struggling over the last few weeks just with,
I think you need a break, yeah.
Yeah, so we're sort of winding down and taking it easy for the remainder of the month, and then we'll slowly wind up in January. I've got a few big things in the works anyway that I've worked on previously. Yeah, so I think it'll pretty well. I think it kicked off with what, the RTX 3080?
Yeah, that's right. Back in September.
Oh, that far ago. Is that the last time I slept? Ever since the RTX 30, and again, I'm just explaining to you guys because you've asked the question. I'm not complaining. I absolutely love my job, and I'm very fortunate that we have it. But yeah, it's been a crazy year for everyone, but the last few months have just been, insane. And I think I was feeling it a bit before we got to, like, even Cyberpunk. Like, I think I really felt it during that whole Zen 3 launch, all those CPUs and then the graphics cards. And then I got to Cyberpunk and I just wanted to get that finished. I was editing the video. No, I was encoding the video. I'd already edited it, encoding the video, ready to upload it, and then we got this email. And anyway, the rest is hopefully history at this point. But yeah, full on year.
Next question is, what sort of performance degradation are you expecting with the 30/6000 series mobile GPUs, and will it be worth waiting to buy a laptop with the new parts, because they seem a long way off with manufacturers still releasing new laptops with 20 series GPUs? I don't think, so just answering the second part of this first, I don't think they're actually going to be a long way off. It sounds like we will be getting a refresh of gaming laptops in the first quarter of 2021, potentially with both new CPUs and GPUs from AMD, Intel, and Nvidia all around the same time. I think we're expecting Tiger Lake H series, AMD's Zen 3 APUs, and mobile versions of these GPUs all roughly around the same time. So I would be expecting a big gaming laptop refresh with all sorts of new products sometime in the first quarter or first half of 2021. So it shouldn't be too long. What sort of performance degradation are you expecting? This always depends on the efficiency of these designs and sort of the performance per watt and performance per voltage sort of things that you can get out of these designs. And because we've basically got 2 new architectures on 2 new nodes, with 30 series on 8 nanometer, 6000 series being really the first. I know there was the 5700 series for mobiles, but not many people used them. But RDNA on 7 nanometer, it's really up in the air about how well they're going to scale down. I think one of the issues with the 30 series, for example, is a card like the 3080 is obviously running above 300 watts.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to put that in a laptop form factor. But at the same time, we don't know, could we get 90% of the performance running at like 100 watts less? Because they might be right at the top end of the efficiency curve on 8 nanometers. So it's going to be interesting to see where the scaling point lies and how much, when we get to laptop power classes like 150 watts, 100 watts, 80 watts, what happens there? Because, yeah, we really don't know. Typically what we've seen in the past, though, is that a desktop GPU will be about 20+% faster than the mobile model if they both have the same GPU, the same name, doing the Nvidia dodginess there. So I'd be expecting the same thing, but yeah, it could go either way. We could see more of a gap because these desktop GPUs are more powerful, or it could go the other way where 7 nanometer and 8 nanometer are actually really efficient for these sort of lower power classes. But either way, I would expect more performance.
Next question here. Does your recommendation of 16 gigabytes of RAM for pure gaming PC still hold up in 2020? Or are we beginning to see performance advantages with 32 gigabytes? Well, that was something I was meant to address this month, but of course ran out of time, so I didn't do it. I do plan on doing that testing with a whole heap of new games. Definitely something I'll be doing next year, hopefully early-ish next year, because it's about 2 years since I last did it. Based on what I'm seeing, though, yeah, look, 16 gigabytes for a pure gaming PC, as long as you're not trying to run every single thing possible in the background. But even then, usually when you run the game, that just gets committed to page file. 16 gigabytes seems fine. Cyberpunk, I don't think, used a huge amount of RAM rather. 32 gigabytes is just a nice luxury. I think Microsoft Flight Simulator, we saw that calling for 32 gigabytes of RAM. Yep. I think for the most part, 16 gigabytes you'll get by with. But, you know, it's kind of like if you've got an RTX 3080 and a high-end Zen 3 or Coffee Lake CPU or whatever, then you probably have 32 gigabytes anyway because it just complements the system. But if you've got something that's a bit more mid-range to entry level, then 16 gigabytes is fine, and it doesn't make sense to spend a heap more money on more memory. Okay, could you go into more detail on why AIBs are allowed to charge $200 to $300 more than AMD's MSRP? How is AMD okay with this, and why is it happening? I feel like we talked about this at length in the last Q&A series, but basically, we don't know that it's the AIBs that are charging the premium. Historically, we would have been like, yeah, it's the AIBs, but there's too many things that don't add up here. Like, so every single AIB, whether it's an AMD exclusive partner or an ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte, so on, they've all got together and they're all like, okay, guys, we're all going to launch our most premium flagship parts first, and we're also going to grossly overprice them. Normally we charge like, 10, 15%. Let's charge like 20, 30%. So we're all going to do that. Everyone in on it? Yep. Okay, let's do it. What seems more likely to you, that all the AIBs have got together to do exactly what I just described then, or AMD has hiked the price up for this first wave? We can't really say for sure what's happened here. We don't have evidence of it, but it just doesn't make sense that all the AIBs are getting together to price fix. We've seen price fixing before, but generally it doesn't, involve so many companies, so many moving parts. So maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe it's mostly AMD. We don't really know. But how is AMD okay with this? And again, that's the second part of the problem that Tim and I have, is that AMD, they pull all the strings. They hold all the keys to what they can do here. So basically, as the supplier, they manage the allocation for all the various AIBs. And they also dictate the specification, whether that be the overclocking specification, whether that be something like memory configurations. AIBs can't get super creative and go, oh, let's make a 32 gigabyte 6800 XT, or, let's do this, let's do that. They can't come up with all these different creative designs. There have been examples of that sort of thing happening in the past, and AMD's always sort of nipped it in the butt. It's the same reason why we don't get PCI Express 4.0 working on certain B450 motherboards, even though the AIB may have validated it to work perfectly fine. AMD said, no, if you want PCI Express 4.0, you have to buy B550. And they have their reasons for doing that. It's not just because they're a greedy, entity. They don't want to have they don't want to leave the validation up to their AIBs, because maybe AIBs, their validation process won't be so good because they want to put PCI Express 4.0 on the box or whatever. So, yeah. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, not much. I definitely agree that, it's not okay that AMD is okay with this.
Yes.
It's kind of the point with they control everything. So, how are they allowing this? Someone is getting on the gravy train with this. Somewhere along the line, someone is really pocketing a big profit on this. And if AMD is okay with this and they're allowing their reputation to be harmed by all the negative commentary over the launch, the inflated prices, consumers being angry, I have to say there is at least some chance that AMD is the one benefiting in some way from this gravy train.
They're not helpless in this.
Because could you imagine a situation where AMD is selling GPUs at a fair, reasonable price? The AIBs are then screwing them by creating all this negative press for AMD because they're selling cards like $200 over the MSRP, and then AMD is just sitting there being like, that's all good, guys. Please go ahead and destroy us and let us get negative feedback, because we're loving that. We're not making any more money, but we're happy to cop all the criticism for this. Can't really see that being something that's too likely and happening.
It's extremely likely. It's extremely unlikely that AMD wouldn't be profiting from this.
Or benefiting in some, I'm not sure which way, but some way.
Yeah. And again, they're not helpless in this. They hold all the power, and they can say to AIBs, we're going to reduce or cut your allocation because you're not meeting certain requirements. And AMD told us that they've enabled the AIBs from day one to produce MSRP cards. So if that was the case and AMD really wanted them to be doing that and they weren't, there would be repercussions. And as far as we're aware, there hasn't been. And again, we're not stunned that we're in a situation where there's limited supply and there's high demand and there's only premium parts available. We're not stunned by that. A power color Red Devil, if the MSRP is $650, $700, maybe a little bit over $700 would be what you'd expect for that part, not $800. Like, that doesn't make sense. Never before has a premium for an air-cooled card been that high.
Even when the cards have launched with no stock, it's never been that crazy.
And we've heard some interesting things from AIBs about this. So, and again, AIBs seem pretty comfortable in the past to throw AMD under the bus. We saw that with ASUS and their Strix mess up where it was 100% a screw up on ASUS's behalf and they blamed AMD. Some of the bigger AIBs, again, like ASUS, have a bit more muscle that they can sort of throw AMD around a bit more with, but there's a lot of AIBs that don't, that are charging way too much, and AMD is letting it happen. So anyway, we'll see what happens early next year, I guess.
Next question. Do you think that the 11th gen of Intel for desktop will equal AMD, or will it still be behind AMD's 5th gen of Ryzen? Now, I assume by 5th gen Ryzen, you mean Ryzen 5000.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Even though it's really the 4th gen and all that sort of thing. So I'm assuming...
Well, because we used to say 1st gen, 2nd gen, 3rd gen, and then it's like 4th gen, but it's 5000.
Ryzen 5000,
yeah.
Okay.
Zen 3.
Do you think that they'll be behind or equal? Depends what we're talking about. If we're talking productivity performance, it doesn't sound like Intel will have a 16-core solution. It sounds like Rocket Lake will top out at 8 cores. So just by that discrepancy, I'd say it's pretty unlikely that they're going to be able to meet the productivity performance there.
It'll be kind of what we've been seeing for a while now. Productivity will definitely be AMD. Gaming will be mixed, or they'll be competitive there.
Yeah, I think Intel, they aren't that far behind, or in some instances are still faster for gaming.
Gaming is... You can't call gaming now. It doesn't matter. It's as simple as that. It does not matter whether you buy Intel or AMD for gaming now. Like, period. No matter what your preference of game is, it does not matter. There's no point arguing that AMD is better for gaming now. There's just no point. They're so close, it just does not matter.
Yeah, so I guess when they're super close now, Intel potentially could come in and give us maybe like a 10% faster or something with the next gen part. But
you'd be back to like, Coffee Lake versus Zen 2 then.
But there's a lot of stuff to play out there, because it's not just about it being the best performing part. It's also about the price. It's also maybe they've got an IPC increase, but maybe they can't clock Rocket Lake as high, which will hurt their gaming performance. So if they get a 20% IPC increase, but they have to drop clock speeds to 4.5 gigahertz, then that's going to be much of a muchness there. So there's some interesting things to play out there. Although I would expect Intel probably, if I had to hedge my bets, probably they will regain the overall performance crown in some way. But whether or not they the better buy is still unclear.
Make it interesting if that is the case. So we'll have to wait and see. And you can rest assured we will be providing a day one review of that stuff. Not too far away now, actually, I don't think. Okay, next one here. Have any other companies pulled anything as shady as what Nvidia tried to do with you guys? Even just as threats without ever following through? I guess it's hard to measure the dodginess of we haven't had a lot of, certainly nothing where they flat out said, you have to change your editorial direction or you're not going to get support from us anymore. I don't think we've had anything quite that brazen, let's say, but we have had probably more recently. It's kind of funny, as the channel gets bigger and you'd think we'd run into less of that crap, we're actually running into more of it. We were threatened potentially with legal action this year by a company.
Yes, that's right.
So that was a fun time.
ASRock has blacklisted us.
ASRock has quietly blacklisted us. So ASRock were, to their credit, at least smart about it. So ASRock, as far as I'm aware, Harbor Unboxed and Gamers Nexus are still blacklisted by ASRock, so they will not sample us in any shape or form because of our honest reporting on their Z490 motherboards. They claimed that their entry-level Z490 motherboards were supreme overclockers or something like that, unparalleled overclocking potential, and they couldn't even run the CPUs stock. So I think BuildZoid over at Gamers Nexus roasted them. Maybe not as hard as we did, but either way, ASRock didn't appreciate that coverage. So another silly situation. I've worked with ASRock on reviews for well over a decade now. 90% of the things I've had to say about ASRock motherboards has been very positive. But you hit them, you call them out for some BS, some false marketing stuff, and they spit the dummy and don't want to know you. So it's their loss, really. We'll still buy their boards. We'll still independently review them. That won't influence our opinions or our reviews of their boards in any way. It just makes them look childish and, a bit silly. So that's that.
Yeah, the shady stuff. I mean, getting blacklisted doesn't happen too often, or getting... No. Most companies, I think this is important to note, is that most companies do genuinely take negative feedback and criticism of products quite well. And most of the time when you speak to companies about products that are poor, they are willing to work on their products and improve them, take the feedback on board and do a better job next time. But occasionally you get the couple of bad apples that sort of try and blacklist you or do blacklist you or do whatever the situation is. I think the more dodgy stuff that you hear about, it can be things like paid reviews, for example, companies suggesting paid reviews, perhaps accidentally, to a channel of our size or a channel in our position.
They play that off as sponsored content, though, so it's not really a big drama.
It's not like you're trying to control the editorial direction. That's a clear...
Yeah, it's a clear
advertising deal.
And we've had plenty of companies approach us to do sponsored content to say something nice about a feature we don't particularly like, and we've turned those offers down. But I think the Nvidia thing was the fact that it came right from the top. And
it was in writing as opposed to just the usual silent treatment that companies like to do.
Yep. So, the company that threatened to take legal action against us if we didn't change our review last year, they did work through us on that. It wasn't just we're going to sue you or else end of discussion type thing. They were trying to strong arm us, and they thought that'd be the quickest and easiest way to solve their problem. That
was actually this year. That's how long this year.
This year I meant, and they quickly found out that wasn't the way to go about that. And I think they learnt some things along the way, but that didn't blow up to be a big public thing because, as I said, we were working through it. It wasn't someone at the top of the company either. It was someone lower down. So, often these things don't need to surface in the way that the Nvidia thing did because, it's someone that may not really know what they're doing. And a whole host of reasons. But anyway.
Usually it's just not done in this way.
No,
usually it's
very rare. Certainly never seen anything quite like this before. So
Yeah.
disappointing, but again, glad to put it behind us, and hopefully we won't have to talk about this ever again, or at least anytime soon.
Yep.
Well, hopefully never again, but realistically, hopefully not anytime soon. Because it does seem to be a thing that they forget about and then do something silly like this in the not too distant future. Which GPU will age better? Better, so I'm not sure that. In your opinion, what does he mean by better?
It's a very suspicious better.
Better. In your opinion, when it comes to gaming at 1440p and above, the 3080 with 10 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory versus the 6800 XT with 16 gigabytes of GDDR6. So the actual type of memory doesn't matter too much because there's other things to sort of take into consideration when talking about memory bandwidth. But basically 10 versus 16 gigs. So with the 3080, it's in my opinion, this is quite different to our take on the 3070 versus the 6800 because you're talking about a doubling of VRAM there plus a lower amount to begin with.
Yep.
10 gigabytes, especially for 1440p, seems like it will hang in there for quite some time. Which one will age better over a much further period of time? Certainly the 16 gigabyte card will be better. At some point in time, we will exceed 10 gigabytes of VRAM, and at that point in time, the 6800 XT will be better. If it happens more than 5 years down the track, it's probably an irrelevant discussion because both of them are going to be so underwhelming in terms of, rasterization performance that it won't really matter. So that's why I think the VRAM argument there between the 3080 and the 6800 XT is probably not that important because, as I said, 10 gigabytes of VRAM will probably get you by for the next few years, especially at 1440p. 8 gigabytes, though, will probably start to run into a few problems in that same time frame.
Yeah. So for a product like the 3080, and if you're talking about, gaming at 1440p and above, like 4K, it'll come down more to, what optimizations are we going to see over time? Given that these cards are designed the way that they are, I don't think we'll be seeing as much of AMD clawing back the gap, considering that Nvidia's got their own things that are going to be, like their double FP32 that potentially is going to have gains of their own down the track. And obviously being the faster card at 4K as well and faster for ray tracing is going to have implications down the line as well. So I think it's very hard to say with those two products which is going to age better because we haven't really seen this sort of...
If you're
There's
gaming,
a lot of things that play out there.
Yeah, if you're gaming at just 1440p, and you don't need things like, the NVIDIA encoder. You don't need any kind of feature that is specific to NVIDIA. Then I think I would go with the 6800 XT. Not just because of the more VRAM, but because overall it does seem to be more suited to 1440p gaming. And as we saw with the 5700 XT, that came on in leaps and bounds throughout the life of the card. If you're gaming at 4K, I think I'd get the 3080.
Yes.
Regardless of other features.
I think it's one of those situations where it's kind of the recommendation which way is based on what it's actually better at just now.
Yes.
Like the 3080 is the better card for 4K now, so why wouldn't it be better in the future? And the same with the sort of 1440p performance. It's very close there. It seems a bit better suited on the AMD side. And then, of course, for things like ray tracing, I find it hard to believe the 6800 XT will ever be better than a 3080 for ray tracing. Yep. So again, you go back to the 3080 for that.
Yep.
So
yeah, ray tracing was the other thing I was going to discuss.
Yeah, it's kind of just making, like, to flip it the other way, you kind of have to be making much more bold predictions. Like, for example, that over time, a 6800 XT will claw back more performance at 4K than a 3080 will gain over time at 4K, which... To me, just based on the architecture, seems unlikely.
I don't think
with the 3080 being so focused on.
Yeah, I wouldn't waste too much time on this conversation though, because they're both so powerful and they're both so evenly matched overall that it doesn't really matter too much. I mean, obviously at this point in time, it's whichever one you can buy at a reasonable price.
Well, that's part of it, isn't it?
But even if they were both readily available at the MSRP, so you're paying $50 less for the 6800 XT, which I don't think people take into consideration too much when talking around $650, $700 for a card. It's like, not too much of a difference there. I just get what I need. It's not going to matter. Like, as I said, 3080 probably a little bit better suited to 4K. 6800 XT maybe a little bit better suited to 1440p. But either way, you could really go either one of those options and you're going to be extremely happy with the experience that you end up with. So
Yep.
not too much of a problem there. Okay, kind of I think a feel-good question here. How do you feel after seeing a very supportive YouTube community? So the YouTube community, for me, that would include all of you guys, all of the viewers, and then other YouTubers on the platform, such as little-known guys, like that Linus guy. He's a kind of a big deal, I think. Jay, same sort of thing. And then it was really good anyway. I won't be silly with it. But yeah, we saw a lot of awesome support from all of our viewers, all of the viewers from other channels that hadn't necessarily heard of us or watched our content. They came over and offered tons of support. So that was really moving. Lots of smaller creators, the good old gamer, not an Apple fan. So many guys that, sorry, I forget the names of your channels now, but I've stopped by a lot of them and thanked them for their support. And if there's any I've forgotten or missed, again, apologies. But yeah, there was just... I was quite impressed by the little guys who stuck their neck out, really, because a lot of these guys are hoping to get included in sort of the GeForce review program, I suppose. So, yeah, by sticking their neck out and standing up for us, especially early on, a lot of them, jumped to our defense before Linus weighed in. I guess it's a lot easier now to sort of offer support because, you've had Linus and Jay jump in and rip Nvidia a new one, so... There's not too much risk in doing that yourself. You're kind of jumping on the bandwagon at this point. Not that I'm criticizing anyone who may be covering it later. Not everyone was able to jump on it straight away. But anyway, I don't even know what to say. Like the support from viewers of, our channel, other channels, so just YouTube viewers in general, other YouTube channels, absolutely phenomenal. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it's awesome to see. And yeah, it's just... I don't know, what more do you say, really?
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit in some behind-the-scenes videos for our Patreon and Float Play members, but yeah, I don't think you really get a scope for the size of the channel that you are until something like this happens. Because, we sort of just go along, we make our reviews and we publish stuff on the channel. We get numbers. Like, we can look in the YouTube dashboard and we can see however many hundreds of thousands of subscribers and how many hundreds of thousands of views our videos get. But until you sort of see bigger places like a Linus or a Jay jumping on board and coming to your defense and support and seeing how many people in the community pay attention to these issues and discuss it on places like Reddit and, add their kind words in favor of us I guess you just really don't get that from the numbers. Like, you can't look at the numbers and be like, oh, we're going to get hundreds of thousands of comments on this if we ever, need someone to come and help us out. So yeah, it's been really a whirlwind of finding out just the sort of and where we're at.
It was overwhelmingly positive as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, really good stuff. And really, I mean, how do I word this? I was going to say it should be. Like, I'm not saying we deserve it, but really there should be no reason to side with the corporation. Like, you're doing yourself a great disservice. So I guess it was great to see so many people recognize that. Yeah, people understanding something that is really, like, it's a reviewer issue. Like, it's something where, Linus can get angry, we can get angry, Gamers Nexus can get angry, and all these channels can get angry about the sampling process and keeping reviews open and free and everything. But as a viewer, I mean, you're going about your day job, you've got your own things to worry about, and really, this is just something that impacts our job. But I think it's great to see how many people understand what we do in our businesses and jobs and be able to, recognize this and just to reemphasize, like, for us, it had nothing to do with sample allocation. Like, don't really care too much if we're not included in the GeForce review program. We'll just buy the cards later. Day one reviews don't affect us too much. Really, for us, the problem was the fact that Nvidia at the time appeared to be going out of their way to strong arm and manipulate reviewers into misleading their audiences, which is something that we're very much against. Again, much like guys like Steve from Gamers Nexus, we're very similar to him in approach to that sort of stuff. Very much against that. So it wasn't us complaining about, hey, we're not getting review samples, this is unfair. Like, we've got the channel to the size where we have now. We've got the support from so many of you guys where buying a 3090 is just no skin off our back. Like we can happily buy one of those a week if we need to. It's more about, them trying to use us as an example because they knew that was going public, and they were using that example of, hey, you don't play ball, you don't change your editorial stance to promote the things we want you to promote, then you ungrateful sod, you're not getting our free cards, rack off. And where we're like, no, you can rack off. We don't want your free cards. We want to be able to review them as an independent review outlet. And we want to be able to say, we want to get feedback from our audience as to what they deem important to them so we can review it for them. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. And we're always trying to gauge your feedback and see what most people want. And that's how we've reviewed our stuff. And that's how we've grown our channel. So, and
yeah, it's been real whirlwind to be at the center of this sort of thing. It's been crazy.
As I said, they've apologized multiple times now. Apparently, that is something we can forget about. It was an accident. It shouldn't have happened. Well, I don't mean an accident, but you know what I mean. It was an unfortunate thing that I think they regret happening. And hopefully, we can just back to business as usual. We'll review the cards, give you guys honest feedback, our honest thoughts, and do what we've been doing on this channel now for like 5 or so years. And I've been doing it for like 20 years. Yep. So anyway, what games have been the hardest to benchmark? Well, I guess the absolute hardest games to benchmark are ones that are like multiplayer only and don't have like some sort of replay feature like, say, a Fortnite does. Games that often get, or a game that's been heavily requested over time that's just like impossible as far as I'm concerned to benchmark is like a World of Warcraft where, and forgive me, I've never played a moment of World of Warcraft in my entire life, but you have to be on like a raid or something. Like, you're looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not sure that's correct, but it's a hard game.
Isn't it like you have to do like, there's some kind of, I always hear the word raid or something, and you have to get together and go do a thing. But
I think we're going to come across as the world's biggest World of Warcraft noobs.
Well, we are. I've never played. It's not my type of game. But basically, there's something in the game that you do that is very taxing, but you need to get a group of guys to do it, and it's just like not repeatable. And benchmarking the game in any other way is just useless.
Yeah.
So games like that, I imagine it's difficult because almost no one has done it. And then those who have done it, it's questionable as to how accurate the data is. So any game like that is obviously difficult. Games that have a terrible built-in benchmark tool like Red Dead Redemption 2, they kind of suck. Because
Red Dead Redemption 2 is also a nightmare because of the day-night cycle. It's random spawn points when you
so that game's a whole lot of fun to benchmark.
I found when I was doing the optimization guide for Fallout 76, so that game was a nightmare because every time you load in, it would like just completely change the day to night cycle. And
well, thankfully that game was a dumpster fire. Yeah, and never had to benchmark it.
Every setting change required a full restart of the entire game. It's like, it's not how modern games work, guys. Get with it.
Yeah. So Red Dead Redemption 2 really needed like a Watch Dogs Legion type built-in benchmark to make it, an easier game for people to test.
All right, next question. Do you think ARM processors will be the future of computing? If so, what advantages may they have in certain workloads? It's too hard to call that one just yet. I think they will have a future. It's whether or not they will be the future, I guess, is another question that's kind of not really clear at this point. There's been a lot of, if we were sort of stuck on Intel Skylake for even longer and AMD hadn't really come to the party with Zen, then you'd sort of say that ARM is more likely to be the future because it might present something different. But the gears are finally cranking over now with x86 a bit more. We're starting to get some genuine improvements. So I think that'll help out that battle a little bit. So yeah, whether or not it'll be the future is to come. If so, what advantages will they have in certain workloads? It sounds like a lot of what's been happening on ARM processors is a strong focus on your single thread performance. So potentially in your ARM optimized apps that are heavily single threaded, that ARM will have some IPC benefits there. Again, it really depends on what chip you're comparing ARM to. Like if you're talking Skylake, then not that impressive. But if you're talking more your Zen 3 and your Tiger Lake designs, and it's a bit of a different discussion. And ARM processors they're built as an SoC. They've got a lot of accelerators on them, things that do media encoding really fast. We're seeing machine learning stuff built in. So a lot of those things generally you have advantages on them. Being smaller dies, Apple, for example, is a node ahead. They're using 5 nanometer for the M1 as opposed to 7 nanometer. So that's another advantage. So yeah, I'm sure there's some situations where they'll have an advantage, but it's still very unclear at this point whether overall they'll sort of be better than x86 in the long run. We'll just have to see.
Okay, speaking of monitors, Tim, is HDMI 2.1 on a monitor something that you should be considered when buying?
If you're a PC gamer, I'd probably say no, because DisplayPort can basically do all the stuff HDMI 2.1 can do. I haven't seen a monitor yet that really requires HDMI 2.1 if it's got DisplayPort. Like, they all work perfectly fine. But if you are using your monitor for PC gaming and console gaming, or just using it for console gaming, then HDMI 2.1 is definitely a consideration, because PS5, Xbox Series consoles don't have DisplayPort. I'd love for them to include DisplayPort, because it would make those consoles so much better, backwards compatible with so many more monitors. But the fact that they require HDMI 2.1 for above 4K 60 hertz and for variable refresh rate means that, yeah, if you're a console gamer, it is something to consider. So again, like we've been talking about, it depends on your sort of use case. But I don't think it's as big of a consideration as some people make it out, for at least for PC gamers. And that'll do it for part 2 of the Q&A series.
Yes, that was number 2.
This is the YouTube questions. So we've done all the YouTube questions that we wanted to get to, and then coming up probably in the next couple of days, maybe next week, we'll have our Patreon Q&A session as well, so part 3. So check back on the channel for that. We are going to film it just after this, so we're going to pull a bit of a sneak and release it a bit later, but still.
Don't tell them. Don't tell them. I drove out to your house twice or 3 times.
And we happen to be wearing the exact same clothes both times as well. So,
wow, it's just continuity. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. So, thanks to all the people that have signed up recently to our Patreon and Floatplane accounts. Those do form the questions for part 3. But yeah, lots of support for the channel. We really do appreciate it recently. And
well, that's it for the year. It's kind of crazy. We've done a lot of Q&A videos this year, 3 a month. I don't think we've missed any months for the year. So
all good for every month.
Yeah, pretty crazy. But anyway, that's going to do it. So as Tim said, thanks to the support for everyone. We will be back with more Q&A videos at the end of January. So in a month's time. But anyway, thank you. I'm your host, Steve.
I'm your host, Tim.
See you next time.